up YouTube? Today I wanted to make a follow-up video about the game-breaking exploit that was going around because a lot of people probably have some false conclusions based on the last video I made and just from basic Reddit and people pretty much fear-mongering or saying whatever. And now that we have more complete information because our wonderful lead dev Chris Wilson, and this is a past picture of him that I found, and there is a Reddit thread that goes to say, can we just find a moment to say how great and rare Chris Wilson is? And I do think that this is true. Even with all of the negativity on Reddit, he still goes on there and he still gives a really, really detailed response pretty much about how they actually fixed cheating and how they actually eliminated this whole thing. And he also goes into pretty technical detail about what actually happens with preload alerts. And I do think it's pretty nice. If you look at his actual comment history, he does try to communicate as much as possible. And even if you disagree with the vision, he is trying his best to illustrate the vision and the thinking process behind it. And I do think that through all the thick and thin, it is a very good sign that he's still willing to communicate in a lot of ways. So in order to understand what was going on, so basically like a couple of days ago, we found out that some players were using a third-party tool to find if there were God-touch mobs in the map, allowing them to find Solaris-Touched, which is the thing that actually converts all your drops to currency without actually clearing the map. Now, I actually found out something interesting is that I think a map can only have one God-touch mob or something like that. Now, GGG posted a long explanation pretty much detailing exactly what was going on and exactly what they were doing in order to prevent this before they actually found out about this exploit and hotfixed it completely. So this is from the thing inside of the post that Chris Wilson made. Was the short explanation is that we had already considered and mostly mitigated the exploit when we implemented Archnemesis mod, so it wasn't of much value to take advantage of, but we have now completely eliminated it. And that's a nice sentence to hear. Completely eliminated. So you might be wondering, why would you actually search for certain Archnemesis modifiers? Well, some Archnemesis modifiers perform drop conversion and it actually converts all of your drops to currency items. Now, something interesting to note is that in this new patch, when you have rarity on your gear, rarity actually converts the currency you get into a higher tier rarity or a higher form of currency. So you can potentially convert your chaos into divines or exalts into divines and stuff like that. But that's how you get people like this who actually gets a bunch of currency and 7 divines from one mob solo, which is an insane amount of currency for most people. Now, these modifiers were pretty much added to Pantheon mods, and that's pretty much why Chris Wilson's post is called Tool-Assisted Pantheon Mod Farming, because these are the gods are the ones you get the Pantheons for. And for anyone wondering what are Pantheons, it's these Soul of the Brine King, Soul of Lunaris, Soul of Solaris, and Soul of Arachali. And I never really ever thought about that, but that's actually where it came from. So in order for the God touch mobs to function, GGG has to preload the assets and effects onto the client so the user would not be killed before it could be displayed on screen. So pretty much GGG has to put the assets onto the client, which allows people to read the memory and find out if there is a God touch mob on the map before they actually have to fully clear the map. So you might be wondering, what exactly was GGG's original defense against all of this third-party tool? So the way that GGG did it, and they did actually add something, was that they made it so it always preloaded a random Pantheon mod regardless of whether a monster actually has the mod in the area. So what that means is it would put Brine King on the map, and you wouldn't be sure if there was going to be a Brine King mod on the map, but it would be the only Pantheon mod. So the way I understand it is that you can only have one God touch mob on the map. So this means you cannot really use the preload request as a way of guaranteeing that you will find the monster in the area. So if you see like Solaris-Touched, there's also a chance that it might be on the map. It meant that if you encountered a Solaris-Touched mob, it would be that one. So if you encounter a Pantheon mod on that map and it shows that it is Solaris-Touched, it will be that one, but it will not guarantee that there is a Pantheon mod on that map. So you might be wondering, well, they already had this defense, so why even change it? Well, there is a problem because players are able to use the process of elimination and of the preload request to really roll out presence of other modifiers. So like I say, if players see that there is a Brian King Touch mod on the map or Eric Colley's Touch, and they're purely looking for Solaris-Touch for currency conversion, then they can pretty much discard the map and move on. Now, this is pretty big, and it would save you a lot of time if you were pretty much just putting in maps and trying to find the Solaris-Touch mob. So if you see that the preload alert from the third-party tool shows that there's another Pantheon mod that's not Solaris-Touch, then you know, oh, the Solaris-Touch is not in the map, and you can go on. Now, the reason why this is important is because players would actually waste a lot of time on false positives, as Chris said, and players would also waste a lot of mapping supplies because you kind of want to juice up the map with 100% deli and other stuff like that in order to get as much quant as possible, which actually scales the Archnemesis modifiers. So like Chris said, players would end up using a lot of maps and juicing resources, making it a far less profitable. So this is pretty much like players are just using the process of elimination and finding out where Solaris-Touch is on the map. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly did GGG do to hotfix it? Now, I'm not completely sure because there's a lot of technical jargon, and GGG didn't really exactly put what they did to fix it. If you saw what Chris Wilson did, and so I'm pretty much just going on the comments on Reddit and the comments on the forums that I found. So you can see here, he pretty much noted that we haven't seen widespread abuse. Early today, we deployed a hotfix that completely removes this problem. So they pretty much didn't really go into detail about what they did. So from what I've gathered, GGG ended up adding randomly generated Archnemesis strings to trick the software. So you can never know if the Archnemesis modifier is in the map or not. So they could have added a bunch of random Pantheon mods. And you would never know if there was Solaris-Touch or Brian King Touch or Eric Colley's Touch. When you saw it, you would just see a bunch of random stuff. And at that point, you're pretty much screwed because you're pretty much having to clear the whole map in order to find out if Solaris-Touch is actually in the map. Now, something else I found was that they actually fixed a lot of the third-party tools capabilities in regards to bestiary mobs and heist chests. So for heist chests, they now send a generic chest to the client, so the client never knows what chest it is. So pretty much they're just spoofing things and sending it to the client. And the cheat program is reading the memory, and then they're finding the wrong things and communicating the wrong information to the player. So for the bestiary mobs, what they did was they sent fake bestiary mobs to the client, so the client can never tell if the monsters are in the game or not, so they don't know if it's real or fake. Now, another thing to note that's really interesting that probably limited a lot of the cheating and the ramifications of this tool was that the preload for Archnemesis was only happening in your local bubble. So what this means is that when you find the assets, you have to be within range of the mob in order to trigger it. And this is based off, I think, how many screens away from your character. So that's what they mean by the local bubble. So some people say it's like 2 or 3 screens away. So you pretty much have to be within 2 to 3 screens away of the God Touch mob in order to find the preload alert that tells you, oh, there's a certain Pantheon mod on the map. So some people say the preload for stuff like Expedition Bestiary Essences happened for the whole map at once, and they actually fixed Bestiary. So for other preload alerts and not Archnemesis, it would show up once you enter the map, and it would show up for the whole map. But for Archnemesis, they already had this in place even before they hotfixed it. So I do think overall, if you think about the Fallout, I do think the economic damage was pretty limited, and there are definitely some people who did it, but they were probably pretty smart and they ran a map that was pretty small so that the bubble around them would pretty much cover the whole map. And there are some people who say widescreen would make it also worse because widescreen would technically make it so your bubble around your character is a lot bigger. Not really sure how it scales with your screen length. So if you had a really, really widescreen monitor, technically your bubble could be the whole map if you were doing maps like Cemetery. So regardless, they said there was no widespread abuse of this technique despite the exposure it got. So after they put it onto Reddit, or people actually posted it onto Reddit, GGG did act very, very fast in implementing the hotfix. And I think within hours of the post, it was already hotfixed and people were just seeing fake Archnemesis mods that completely ruined it. And they also said that they will ban anyone who did it. And it's pretty easy to ban for memory reading hacks, especially if they get wind of it. And it is interesting to know, I was looking through some accounts at the top of the ladder, and let me see. So if you look at the #1 person on Calandrily, fixed game is unplayable. He's actually playing Venom Jar. And when I went to his account, it was banned. Not really sure if he was using the tool, but that's just one person I found that was suspiciously banned. So based on the wording that GGG used, there were definitely people doing it, because if they said no one was doing it, they would have just put it in the post, but they wrote here, we haven't seen widespread abuse. So if you haven't seen widespread abuse, that means there is some abuse going on. But I do think that they fixed it soon enough after the Reddit post to limit any economic damage. And I do think that some of the stuff like the bubble from the preload for Archnemesis was really, really annoying. And also the fake Pantheon mods, or not fake, but they always randomly generated a Pantheon mod on the map. So there were still going to be a lot of false positives. So I do want to applaud that. I think GGG actually added enough precautions to make it not like super, super profitable, where these people were just putting in maps in a hideout and immediately knowing if there was Solaris touching the map or not. And that was just not the case. So overall, I do like how GGG actually implemented protections against this. It does show that they know what they're doing, even when there is no community outcry, and they were fixing things like the beasts, the heist exploits, and that might be a good or bad thing, because right now beasts are probably very, very expensive without the beast farmer. And it's great to see, as I said, that they've been actively trying to combat cheating. And I do think they acted fast enough to limit the economic damage. So here you can see a dollar bill or $100 bill torn to shreds, and the face of the Divine Orb is on it. So the Divine Orb is still intact. And in terms of how much it actually is right now, the Divine Orb is actually just going crazy high. It's already at 170 chaos, which is where chaos to exalt usually peak. So it'll be interesting to see where it ends up. But overall, I just want to update everyone about the exploit and how it's been fixed, and just to literally calm people's nerves about how they think there's economic damage being done. And GGG did ban a lot of these accounts, as I showed you from the #1 player on Kalandra. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalts, and Mage Bloods and Divine Orbs than me, and legally found Solaris Touch mobs. And see you next time. Bye!